is if there's a question that comes up, we can circle back to it and then we can unclick you and you can ask the question and so forth and so on. But the way we're going to go this evening is I will give an introduction about the bookstore, and it will give some people who are running late a chance to sign on. And then I will introduce our author, Roger Rosenblatt, and he will read from his book. And then we will take some questions and have a discussion and some musings, et cetera, and so on. So on that note, there, Roger, there you are. I couldn't find you for a minute. Everybody all settled? All right. My name is Alice Hutchinson, and I am the owner of Birds Books in Bethel, Connecticut. Thank you all for joining us this evening. We're a small, very small, independent bookstore, and we're currently in a mixed mode of limited access to the store with masks and sanitizer and a considerable number of phone and online special orders. We have in-store, curbside, and mail delivery. My son Stephen and I run the business together with the assistance from friends and a couple of college employees. Zoom is the norm right now, and we thank God for it. And we use it for book groups and author visits. We're so glad you could join us tonight. We do have a website that Stephen's going to post on the chat, just in case you need to find your way back there for any reason. As I said before, in case you've just joined us and you want to open up the chat, you go to the bottom of your screen, you click on the chat icon, and it opens up a window on my screen to the right. Roger Rosenblatt is the author of 5 New York Times notable books of the year, 4 national bestsellers, and 7 off-Broadway plays. His essays for Time Magazine and PBS NewsHour have won 2 George Polk Awards, the Peabody, the Emmy, among others. In 2015, he won the Kenyon Review Award for Lifetime Literary Achievement. He held the Briggs Copeland Appointment in Teaching of Writing at Harvard. He is Distinguished Professor of England, great. He is Distinguished Professor of English and Writing at SUNY Stony Brook, Southampton. Roger, thank you and welcome this evening.
Thank you, Alice, and thank all of you who have decided to spend the early part of your evening with me. Cold Moon, here's a little devil, Cold Moon. Cold Moon, it may seem a response to the pandemic, and a number of people have thought it was a response, written in response to the pandemic, into the atmosphere, the tense and anxious, dangerous atmosphere in which we're living now. In fact, the book was on its way to publication before the pandemic struck, or before we were aware of it. But the reason it might seem prescient, and I assure you I'm hardly ever prescient, the reason it might seem prescient is that it deals in subjects that apply all the time, specifically, as the subtitle suggests, life, love, and responsibility. And in a time that is acutely anxious now, the time in which we are struggling, life, love, and responsibility have a certain power, a certain force in our lives. Ask what inspires such a book, I really have no idea. Writers are loath to talk about inspiration unless they're just making it up. One moment something is not there, and then one moment something is. My wife and I lived with our grandchildren in Bethesda, Maryland, for 7.5 years after our daughter's death. And I used to go to the kids' public school from time to time to talk about writing. And one day, my granddaughter Jessica introduced me to her 4th grade classmates thus: "This is my grandfather, Boppo," my grandparental name. "This is my grandfather, Boppo. He lives in the basement and does nothing." I could not falter for accuracy. It's what writers do. We do nothing. King Lear said, "Nothing comes of nothing," but for writers, everything comes of nothing. So in the case of Cold Moon, I was looking at the moon one night. I was staying actually in a house on the New Jersey shore in December, and I was looking at the moon that suddenly appeared in the sky like a harvest moon. I could not imagine what it was. It could, because I knew it was too late for the harvest moon. an orange, a blood orange, vast in the sky. And I looked it up and learned there was such a thing as a cold moon, of which I had not heard before. And the cold moon is the last moon of the year, and it augurs the winter solstice. I thought I am in the winter solstice of my life, and so I make a connection to the cold moon. Then I looked at the ocean and saw the moon lighting the ocean and the particular light it gave. Um, and then I don't know. Books started to materialize. So we begin, as all writers begin, making everything out of nothing or something out of nothing. So let me read you how Cold Moon begins, and you'll get a sense of a couple of things. One, the passages. I move from passage to passage the way I try to move in movements in music. I play jazz piano, and the hope is that one feels a kind of jazz movement in the book, passage to passage. And then you'll get an idea of the full range of the subjects of life and love and responsibility. Wipe the tears from your face and see the boulevard of light the moon has cast upon the black water. See the boulevard as a staircase laid flat for a moment before it takes shape and rises. Like the one in the movie Stairway to Heaven, a sort of celestial escalator made of white marble steps moving forever skyward. The story is about a courtroom trial in heaven, a battle for a man's soul, whether he should die young as he was scheduled to do, or be allowed to remain on earth and live out a long life. A woman's love for him wins the case. Love wins the case. Wipe the tears from your face, see the moonlight and rise. No need for a stairway. Hold on to your soul, one shot of courage, and we're climbing. Sitting on the beach with my 10-year-old grandson, Sam, I watched his brother, 6-year-old James, balance himself while standing barefoot on the top rail of a high white wooden fence. James does things like that. Climbs something, finds a perch, disregarding any possible danger. Now, dressed in red shorts and a Washington Nationals blue t-shirt, he is gazing out to sea, his little body angled away from Sam and me. It's a wonder how James goes off on his own and takes in whatever he can, I remarked to Sam. Without turning to me and looking admiringly at his little brother, Sam says matter-of-factly, he loves life. Midnight on December 10th, 2019, nearing the advent of the year of flawless hindsight. A bloodshot orange presents itself without notice on the northern horizon, just above the dark beach and the dark sea. This is the cold moon, also identified as the long night's moon, the last before the winter solstice. My weathered mind flicks to my own winter solstice, the coming of my winter time of life. Through a 3-windowed wall, I watch and brood. The sea rolls out like an old dog into its own black coat, sporadically spotlit path, recalling the jungle runways I saw in Africa when I was a journalist, writing about wars. Dim lights like phosphorescent animals murmur at the far end of the beach. The beach itself, a bench of robed jurists, versed in maritime law. A solitary tern hangs in the air on the word wait. An unseen magistrate asks, who is responsible for this wreck? How still is night. And with every passing year, a hardening of the arteries. The bones fray, the skin puckers, the skills ebb. At this age, comrade, at this stage, what is to be done? Should we toss in the towel or gallop across the Enichkov Bridge together in the opposite direction from whence we came? And, like the czars, make a palace of winter? I am a book in your lap. Better to know where to go than how to get there. I wander from thought to thought, having learned but 3 things from my long night's moon. I believe in life. I believe in love. I believe we are responsible for each other. Blood roses, life. A golden bubble of the sun, a rhetoric of shadows, redeeming snow, life. The click of the lock, the crackpot. The camo kayak, the littered dock and mottled face of the kiosk. Where is the drowned girl? Life. a success of geese, the annals of your eyes, blood on a boxing glove, blood on a tunic. Well, did you ever? What a swell party this is, life. The departure of kings, down the hatch, down the thatched roof of the rocks, on to the rocks, on an Irish coast, Irish on the rocks, or neat or not, life. An ecstasy of daffodils, a parody of weeds, a comedy of eros. If you're ever in a jam, here I am. If you're ever in jelly, rub my belly, life. Where's the drowned girl? The bronze grip of fear, fear of the bronze grip. Playgrounds, coffee grounds, on Stephen's Sunday morning, they've clogged the drains, evidence of rain. Ravens explode upward in a black parachute, life. A flattery of moonlight, redeeming moonlight. And the cold moon acknowledges the glitter of the sea as a day moth folds its wings and sings, "Good night, ladies." It swings. Moth dreams, rub your angry skin till it's raw, blood on your knuckles, blood on your thighs, cast your aspersions to the wind, your icons, bygones, frantic, pedantic, antic, Atlantic. Life, life, life. One afternoon, I heard a thud from the kitchen. When I went to look, a dead bird lay on the deck outside the sliding glass door. The glass door had brought about the death of the bird, which must have mistaken it for open air in the blinding sunshine. The bird's body had left an imprint on the glass, vague and lacy, like a smoke ring from a cigarette. The imprint was a complete circle, except for a small smudge at the top where the bird's head must have hit. The little guy lay on its back on the deck, still as any sun worshiper. I did not recognize the markings, green, orange, and brown, like a mallard, but smaller. When I picked it up to put in a Ziploc bag, the bird felt heavier than I had anticipated. The body had heft and substance. Only when I had tossed it in the trash and returned to the house did I notice the imprint on the glass door. It was there that day and remained through the following morning and a few days later. I would wipe the glass door clean eventually, but not that day. The smoke ring was all that was left of the bird. What will you leave behind, this book and that? What will you leave behind? That gesture, that smile. What will you leave behind? A faint imprint, a feather. What will you leave behind? Would you mind repeating the question? What will you leave behind? I don't know. Love? That's more like it. So the book begins, and we begin the discussion of life, love, and responsibility, moving from the winter solstice and my winter solstice to passages that, as I say, move like jazz piano. Jazz piano, jazz itself is the art of improvisation. And so these pieces feel improvised, and in some cases were entirely improvised. Interesting thing about playing piano, I play by ear. When you make a mistake, the trick is then to make another mistake to cover the first mistake so that both seem intentional. And sometimes it actually works. You invent things. There are layers of meaning in music, layers of meaning in jazz, and there are layers of meaning that I try for in this book. It's called ostinato, and let me read you a little passage about that. Ostinato. Jazz men like Bill Evans and Miles Davis, as if there could be anyone like them, are masters of the ostinato, the repeated phrase or theme. So practiced are they in this art that 5 levels of ostinatos can be reached and detected at once. The effect is a mystery. You remember hearing something that you hear for the first time. One may try for that effect in writing too. Life, love, and responsibility. In the ostinatos of these fragments, can you make out the tune? Ostinatos, one element, and suspended chords, another, or what are called sus chords, part of the art of improvisation. I improvise in my book. I hear the music in the words. Alan Bergman, the great Alan Bergman, who was his wonderful wife, Marilyn, wrote The Way We Were and The Windows of Your Mind and so many other standards. I heard Alan say once, I hear the words in the music. And then I realized I hear the music in the words. So I go from life to love to responsibility and back again, playing the different chords, moving from one passage to another. And the sus chords that I talked about before, a sus chord is, you take a basic chord of C, E, and G, and then you play A next to G, and you play them together, and that's a sus chord. You are playing a note that in a sense doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. Thelonious Monk made a lifetime of doing just that, playing sus chords, words that did not exist, yet when he plays them, suddenly you wish they existed. In writing, that effect is ambiguity. Things meaning more than one thing, a note sounding more than one note. Let me read you this then. Life will take your breath away before any virus has a chance to. So, I mean, the wonder of life, just seeing life, being able to appreciate life. And see, and the art of seeing. I teach my students, when you write, see and make your readers see. It's the first thing that a writer must do. If you feel it absolutely necessary for your safety, that is, for your general well-being, or for the sake of your poor old mother, bless her, shut your eyes. For my part, I shall keep my eyes wide open like Wittgenstein's. You know Wittgenstein? He called himself an eye in the socket of the world, wide open, I mean wide. Even snails blink, but I shall be an eye in the socket of the world so as to detect the pebbles embedded in the keys, the grains of God knows what in the making of a mirror, and every gesture of the heart or head, no matter how invisible to the snail's naked eyes, that you, of all people, care to make. See that? The tawny stones in Athens and Jerusalem, see that? Of course you don't. Your eyes are shut tighter than newborn snails. Over the shadowy steps you traipse like a clodhopper. Are you blind? Am I blind? Is it possible that I am blind? Even though my eyes are open to everything, the endless sky, everything, this rite of adoration, this seeing, this visible moon in the palm of one's eyes. Life will take your breath away, as I say, if you look at it before any virus has a chance to. What does seeing teach us? Seeing teaches us that not that life is full of answers, but that life is full of unresolved things that are a mystery. Art is the shaping of the unresolved. Art may give shape to irresolution, things not entirely understood. So I read you this. And this is about the sea and the irresolution of the sea. I kept looking at the ocean as I watched the moon. One thing you can say about the sea, it resists resolution. In turmoil, in a murmur, under a typhoon, in the doldrums, it moves constantly without any indication that it seeks a single shape, goal, or purpose. It does not wish to take a position. To the contrary, it clearly, actively wishes to take no position, or to take every position at once, which makes the sea like poetry, like art in general. Art gives shape to irresolution, everything resolved by nothing resolved. Something implied in this, I think, the act of resisting resolution suggests limits to knowing. The motion of the waves, the motions of the mind, keep life at sea. No answers here, no answers in a poem by, say, Wallace Stevens. There is this possibility, there is that. Both coexist in a comfortable discomfort. What do I mean when I speak of the world? What size object do I have in mind? Something so huge one cannot wrap one's arms around it or a thought around it. Something so small one can hold it in the palm of one's hands like a single tear. That's what happened in Stairway to Heaven. A man's soul was rescued from death by a handheld tear. I am a little world made cunningly, John Donne said. All in one, I am limited without limits. How strangely calming it is to watch the sea creating, questing, cresting, unquesting, content in its eternally restless self. To seek without any ambition to find. Love is a bit like that. We live in one another's shadow. By the way, I realize that I keep mentioning Stairway to Heaven here in Connecticut, or you're in Connecticut, where I spent summer after summer in Weston and in Westport. And maybe Alice, we can talk about that at the end of this, because Stairway to Heaven, which my mother took me to when I was 6 years old, fills this book and also has filled my life because of the mystery of the movie on a child. So art gives shape to irresolution, and an improvised book of improvised passages. But even improvised things have to have a center. There has to be something at the core, something solid. All music is composed of harmonics and rhythm and melody, but melody is the most important. Melody is what you go back to. It's the equivalent in writing of the story. Melody is the story, and all writing is the story. Fiction, of course, short story, novel, story of a story, it's there. A poem is the story usually of a feeling, of an impulse. An essay, the story of an idea. A memoir, the story of a memory. And a meditation like Cold Moon, I'm not really sure. Sometimes I think it's the story of a prayer or of a state of longing. Perhaps the story of a state of longing. We live for stories. We are a narrative species, us people. We like to say we are a rational species, but history makes that a mockery, the way we behave. But a narrative species, that is something else. We tell stories, we live by stories. Everything around us is a story. What is a jury trial in law? What is a jury trial but a competition of stories? Prosecutor tells one story, the defense attorney tells another story, and the jury or a judge decide which story is to be preferred. Not which one is the truth. The truth we never know, but we know which story we like better. Which story? What is the nativity called? The greatest story ever told. Not the greatest thing that ever happened, but the greatest story ever told. Why? Because whoever came up with the phrase was very smart. A story cannot be pinned down. A story is expansive, evident, internally expansive. Thousands of years of belief and faith based on the idea of a story, not claiming anything for it other than the greatest story ever told. In medicine, there's a field now called narrative medicine, and it's so interesting that it's a very big field because it depends on the storytelling of the patient. The patient tells the story of her or his disease. The doctor, in turn, tells the story of the therapy. You take this pill now and that pill in a week, and you get a shot in 2 weeks, and we hope the story has a happy ending. In business, you hear the phrase, Smith, we don't do things like that around here. That's not the way we do things around here, Smith. What does that mean? It means that Smith has violated the mythology of the business. There is a mythology of a business. There's the way they do things, and somebody said something or did something that violated that mythology. All is story. In politics, he, she who tells the best story wins. The best story, not the most moral story, but the best. Why is Donald Trump president? A question I hope I will not ask in a week. Why is Donald Trump president? Because he told a better story. He told a better story than Hillary. Hillary had no story. He had a vile story, but he had a story. I'm going to build a wall. It's going to be this high and that thick and keep Mexicans out. It had that all the vivid qualities of a story. In politics, he who tells the best story wins. Story is in us. It is in us like a biological fact. You know the Perfect Storm, the book about that storm off New England where everybody went down. It begins with the captain of a schooner in a hurricane, and he is going to buy it. There's no question he is not going to survive the hurricane. What does he do? By lantern light, he writes something, puts it in a bottle, and sends it out. Why? Because he has a story to tell. He had something to tell somebody, some mysterious recipient of the story. The Jews in the Warsaw Ghetto, in the last days of the Warsaw Ghetto, they saw their relatives and their friends hauled off to extermination camps. They were dying of diphtheria or starvation, and yet, they were able to write. They took pieces of paper and they wrote on those pieces of paper, little fragments of paper, diary entries or poems or riddles or stories themselves. And they took the pieces of paper and they rolled them up and they slipped them into the crevices of the ghetto wall. Why? Why did they do it? They knew that they had no contact with the outside world. They knew that if these pieces of paper were to be discovered, that they would be discovered by the Nazis, who would deride them, rip them up, laugh at them, and so forth. They did it because they had to do it. They had a story to tell, and they told a story. Jean-Dominique Bauby, the editor of Elle magazine, had so severe a stroke in his 40s, I think, that he could move no part of his body but his left eyelid. And what did he do with his left eyelid? He signaled the alphabet. And with that alphabet, he wrote a book, The Diving Bell and the Butterfly. He had a story to tell. And I only alone am left to tell thee, says the messenger in Job. And I only alone am left to tell thee. The important thing is telling of the story. The messenger tells the story. I only alone. You don't need only alone in the same sentence. So it's fun to edit the Bible. Melville, what does he say? Yeah, what does he have Ishmael say? And I alone am left to tell the tale. The telling of the tale. The tale is everything. The melody. So we come back to My Cold Moon, and it's the story of life and love and responsibility. And on life, you saw some example of it when I had that riff on just a collection of things and thoughts and images with blood roses, or Sam saying of James, he loves life, he loves life. Or love, try this. Talk about love in a different way, in an oblique way, but it gets there. Nothing is gone, nothing. Not the tide, not the moon, not your Amy or your Aunt Julia or your 6th birthday party where you stood on your chair and sang Blue Skies. Not your sins either. Some things you want gone forever, some you want to retrieve and keep in your purse or your safe deposit box. Whatever you want or do not want makes no difference, no difference. Nothing is gone. And Philip Larkin's line, what will survive of us is love. That is not gone either. Not the line, not the thought. What will survive of us is love. As for responsibility, you see responsibility in everything. I spent some time in the book just talking about responsibility, mutual responsibilities in nature. There's a mimosa tree in Texas where the beetles who feed on that tree go out to lay their eggs on a rotten branch, and the weight of them and their eggs makes the branch fall down, and the tree then begins a renewal, and the beetles go on to another tree. The tree depends on the beetles depend on the tree. There's the most amazing process in birth, and our birth, the birth of children, where at the moment of conception, the mother and the child begin to exchange cells in this conversation that goes on between them, this chat, cellular chat that goes on between them. And the child bears the cells of the mother has the cells of the child. When the child grows up, bearing the cells in all his or her organs, heart, mind, lungs, and so forth. And the mother retains the cells to better support the next birth. So the first child is providing some fortification for the birth of the next child. All of these connections, mutual responsibility. And I write of my Aunt Julia, and I will introduce you to her because I felt that she embodied all three things: life, love, and responsibility. My Aunt Julia. My Aunt Julia was small and bent from osteoporosis, and she walked with much difficulty, though you couldn't tell because her bright hello ran interference for her. She worked at her secretarial job her whole life, taking 2 weeks vacation in the summers in Kennebunkport, Maine. The proprietor of the hotel she stayed in gave Julia her room for free simply because he liked her. Who could not like my Aunt Julia? She was life itself in a small package. An amateur painter, she brought her canvases to Kennebunkport and her easel and oils, and she spent the long, bright days painting the sea. She wore big jewelry and turbans. One summer when I was 15, out of the blue, Julia asked would I like to join her in Kennebunkport. Without hesitation, I said yes. Those were the summers I worked at a tedious job for my grandfather, watching over a dead office or playing pickup basketball in nearby playgrounds. 2 weeks with Julia seemed the ticket. We took the train to Kennebunkport. The hotel proprietor, a burly man whose face was barely visible under a cloud of gray whiskers, greeted Julia with a bear hug that hoisted her high in the air. She smiled demurely. "We love to have your aunt here," the proprietor told me. "This hotel has been around for 162 years. 4 U.S. presidents have stayed with us, Winston Churchill too, even the Queen of Denmark. But Julia Spruch is our favorite guest. She is real aristocracy." My room had a small terrace with a direct view of the ocean. It occurred to me that it must have cost a good deal, but poor as Julia was, she never mentioned money, certainly not the lack of it. We had all our meals together. She told me about spending her days painting. I told her about my solitary walks and about meeting some kids from Boston on a beach. One girl had asked me if I was an MOT, a member of our tribe, meaning Jewish. I had never heard the acronym. Julia asked what I had said to the girl. I told her I am not a member of any tribe, I said. Julia patted my hand. "That's right." "I'm painting something for you," she told me. "A portrait?" I asked. She specialized in portraits, often of strangers, people she happened to meet. Everyone interested her, attracting her sympathies. She loved people naturally, and she saw their worth. "I'm sure I'll love it," I said. On the morning of our departure, she led me to the side porch where she had been working those 2 weeks. A hotel bath towel was draped over the canvas so that Julia could unveil her artistry with mock ceremony. Many years later, when she was dying, I used to hear her screams of pain in the hospital hall before I got to her room. The screams would stop abruptly when I entered and she saw me. Then she would smile and offer me the meal on the tray she had not touched. In a faint voice, she would ask how I was, what I was doing. Whatever I told her, no matter how insignificant, was greeted with joyful surprise. She never went silent. As I was leaving one afternoon, she asked if I ever looked at the portrait of me she had done in Kennebunkport, me standing on a terrace looking out at sea and one lone sailboat. "Only every day," I tell her. At a small memorial service in the office in which she had worked, her colleagues spoke of her warmly. Each said something different, emphasizing a particular quality of my aunt's. But there was no question they were talking about the same person. Her boss went last. He said Julia was very small and she lived in a very small compass. But the world of her heart was immeasurable because she filled every inch with life, love, and care for others. My Aunt Julia. Life, love, and responsibility. The Trinity on which the world depends, I believe. So the book follows the path of the cold moon, path of the moon, and sees where the winter solstice leads us. And then we come to the end of the book, making a reference to song. There are lots of songs in this book, songs that I can play on the piano and riff on. And so we come to this. "Come do it while you can. Come help them. They do not call you, they do not know you, but come help anyway. In a shiver of wildflowers in the seepage of the December ocean, as a cortege of blackbirds passes by, do it. No need to be territorial. Extend the borders of your authority to the ferrymen, the nervous Nellies, the tailors, the traders, the birders, the hoi polloi. In a snit, in a rage, in a snowstorm, the sea white as a sheet of paper, make a mad dash for them before the gate slams shut. You still have time. He who hesitates is toast. Those tanks, the machine guns mounted on the tripods, they can't hit the side of a barn. Under the boardwalk, fish slap themselves to death. Pack up your commas and your consonants. Unfortunately, the brass band is on holiday at the Ritz, so you'll have to come unheralded. Don't worry, nothing to it. No preparation necessary. You look fine. Oh, this old thing. And lose the fruit basket. Come as you are. First light. First light. I drift among the flotsam like bait, circling the traps. I paddle on my back, playing otter, cracking clamshells with my paws. In a passing gondola, a radio plays on the nodes of the blues. 10,000-year-old bones of a murdered tribe rise up in Kenya and reassemble themselves. We are all repeat offenders. One day I'll go out and douse the flamethrowers, sink the armadas, and play 7-string guitar for school children. One day I'll comb the beach for bottles containing notes from the past. One day I'll die, but not today. Today I play September Song on the piano. Today the wind ruffles the fretted terrain of Mars. The mimosa grows in Brooklyn. The stairway climbs to heaven where love is. The selkies sleep. The eggs hatch. The cells chat. We are life. We are love. And we are responsible for each other. I troll my paw in the water and feel candles. And these few precious days I'll spend with you. These precious days I'll spend with you. Thank you. That's Cold Moon. So Alice, if you don't rescue me, there's going to be a lot of silence.
No, I'm here. I'm here. I am going to rescue you. And I have a number of questions, but I'm hoping that others do too. So if you come up with questions that you want us to unmute you so that you can ask, type your name or type your question in the chat and we'll get to you. But the first, I have a couple that I do really want to ask first. You just mentioned selkies, and I had to look them up, as I'm sure many people did who've read the book already. And you talk about the sea quite a bit. First of all, have you ever seen a selkie?
That
But the other
sounds like the
question
beginning
is,
of a song, actually.
I know. Well, go for it.
Have you ever seen a selkie? Well, I have.
What is the you clearly have a very strong relationship to the sea. Is it something that you came in with? Is it something that, I mean, did you cultivate it over the years? I mean,
No, nothing
tell
more.
me about.
No more than any kid. I learned to swim in Campo Beach in
Oh,
Westport.
wow.
Since my folks took vacations in Connecticut, I was always by the water. I wrote this book by the water, and I wrote a new book, as a matter of fact, which is just finished by a different body of water, by the bay. I'm drawn to it. I think most people are, in the mystery of it and the vastness of it. But I have no special attachment to it, and I certainly don't know much about it. It just feels right to me. It feels like home.
There are a lot of emotions throughout this book. There's sometimes, some of them are sad, some of them are wistful, but there's ultimately quite a bit of hope. What makes you so hopeful? What brings you to that point where you can inspire? I found myself inspired by the end of the book and taken on quite a long journey to get there in so few pages.
I am very glad of that. I don't really know how to explain it. I suppose I'm naturally, not necessarily foolishly optimistic, but I do believe in what I said before, the power of observation. And the more you see of the world, the more you wonder. The more you wonder, you have to appreciate. And somewhere that appreciation becomes optimism, just appreciating what you see, what the world is made of. But I do mean it to be inspirational that way. I mean, I could never write an inspirational book of the sort that people of religion write, for example. But I try to make something useful of the way I see the world, and hope that it might be, as I say, useful to those now who are in the dumps about the world we live in, and have right reason to, because it is an extremely scary time. As I said, I didn't write the book to address this time, but I'm glad it seems to fit.
You may have actually just answered this particular question, but I still want to read it anyway. In a 2012 article in the New York Times, you said the writers we admire most are propelled by a mixture of innocence and chutzpah. the nerve to write big, coupled with a childlike need to cultivate the virtues they have always believed in. They may surprise themselves by the insistence of their own higher motives and values. They may also believe that as readers, we will surprise ourselves for the same reasons. Why else would eyeless Milton have decided to move heaven and earth to appeal to our better angels? Let us speak of Milton and our better angels. Do you feel that this book asks us to take a higher path? And are you leading by example or both?
Well, I would never lead by example, but I might lead by observation. Just what are the things that I see, and I hadn't thought of it your way, but I think you're right. And I didn't make the connection between that piece that I wrote for the Times Book Review and this. But you're right, the connection is there. When I say in that piece that let's look at the major writers and what they're doing, it's very interesting. I can't tell you what style Dickens writes in. I can tell you the style of minor poets, but I can't tell you the style that Dickens writes in. And why can't I do that? Because style, however important it is not the main thing about Dickens. It is addressing the lives of the poor and addressing the lives of the down and out, and justice, the subject of justice. There's nothing that brings us to our needs as a story where injustice has occurred and justice is imposed on it. Shakespeare only deals in big subjects, only in big subjects. Milton only in big subjects. All the great writers were moved by major thoughts and major impulses to right the world, to make things right. It's too overwhelming a place not to. Sometimes I read writers who are experts in strangeness, but strangeness won't hack it. Strangeness will not do it on its own. You've got to be go to the center of the soul and figure out what is important in life, love, responsibility.
Amen. You write, remember that Brecht said when he asked what to sing about in dark times, he said, sing about the dark times.
Exactly.
Loud, lusty singing. Do you see 2020 as dark times and as Cold Moon, your loud, lusty song?
Yes, ma'am.
That's a short answer. Yes, ma'am. I have to tell you, I wrote a review for Goodreads, and it takes a lot for me to write a review for Goodreads because it's an Amazon product, and I don't give Amazon anything. But I wrote a review just because I felt compelled to. And every single person that has come into our store that has looked for something, I mean, they've been stuck in that place of, I just can't read right now. I'm stuck here. I need something good, but I don't. And I just say, read this. Trust me. Just trust me and read this. Because I felt it was a lifeline to remind me that it wasn't about me.
That's
And
right.
I very much appreciate what it brought to the table. Not only exceptionally well written, of course, but it just brought so much that took me out of where I was and allowed me to think of a larger place. And I have to appreciate what it brought to the table for me. And I really would like this message to get to other people. So I want to thank you for that.
I thank you
Um,
for that. I'm very glad.
oh, you're welcome. I had the pleasure also, and I'm waiting for other questions to come in the chat, but it's completely up to you all. I want to say that I had the extreme fortune of, and I mean extreme, of being invited to a 80th birthday party roast of Roger. And it was obviously on Zoom, because everything is on Zoom. For any of us that care about anybody, that want to keep the world as safe as possible, Zoom has been a lifeline. But the people that came to fet you for your birthday.
No, it wasn't that, Alice. The line went around the block of people who wanted to make fun of me. And these happened to be
Well,
the
yeah,
first
and they certainly did
7 or 8.
with great gusto. There was Billy Collins, Alan Alda, Gary Trudeau, Alan Bergman, Judy Woodruff, and Meg Wolitzer. And I asked you before.
Patty Marks too.
Oh, and Patty Marks. And I asked you right before we got on the Zoom call what it was like for you, but I thought it might be worth sharing to others what it was like to have people with tremendous heart uh, roast you.
It was great. I never had been roasted before. I'd barely been basted before. Oh, and the other of the roasters was one of my students. And the reason I was glad to have one of my students on is that she was by decades the youngest person in the group, and she was very funny. She said, and we always love Roger, and we love to hear the 10 anecdotes he tells all the time. The funniest of this group, believe it or not, well, you saw it, so you know it was Judy Woodruff. Judy, nobody knew this phrase. Who knew? Nobody knew how funny Judy could be, and with a perfect delivery and deadpan stuff. So she said, "Well, Roger, I wanted to talk about your book, so I went around to all the offices of the NewsHour, every single office. We couldn't find a single book. Then she said, you know your friend Jim Lehrer, and Jim passed in January. And I know you loved Jim, and Jim loved you. In fact, Roger, you were only on the NewsHour because Jim loved you. And the and she said, we used to put your essays on when we had a little time. We call it dead air. We call it. And anyway, she went on and on like this in a perfect deadpan delivery. It was wonderful. They were all great. Alan, Gary, my whole crew.
Interesting is that Judy was on the night of the vice presidential debate, so it's not
Yes,
like she didn't have
I know.
someplace else to be.
She snuck in for a half hour
Pretty
just to do
amazing.
this. I thought so too.
I have a question here from Nancy, and I'm going to unmute you, Nancy, so you can ask your own question.
Oh, thank you. First of all, I'd like to say that I read Mr. Rosenblatt's book, Making Toast, some time ago. And his approach, your approach to life. I wanted to ask you, consider yourself an optimist, although I wouldn't say you're an optimist necessarily. You do push through. I see it in Cold Moon, and I see it in Making Toast, and I see it in your other work. You do always look to the good. Do you consider yourself an optimist?
I liked your phrase, Nancy, push through, because that is something that I do recognize. Making Toast, for those who don't know it, was written in response to our daughter's death. And she died at the age of 38. She was a doctor. And my wife and I moved in with, my wife Ginny and I moved in with our grandchildren to live with them for 7.5 years. The youngest, James, is only 14 months when this happened. So this is something that we wanted to do, and it saved us as well as saving them. But really, what choice do you have? And you come to Nancy's phrase of pushing through. When something happens like that, it knocks you to your knees. So what are your choices? Stay on your knees or stand up? So we stood up.
Yeah. It's a lovely book and a very positive outlook. When I read it, I did not have grandchildren of my own. Now I do.
Good for you.
I can even more appreciate the situation that you were in and going back to play dates and diapers, and because
I know.
God bless you.
You have to remember, I used to change James in the morning and carry him downstairs so that his father could get a little more sleep, then set him in his little seat. And I'd always ask him, what should we have for breakfast, James, knowing perfectly well what he'd say. And he said, toast. So Making Toast became the title of the book. Now I look at 15-year-old James. I look at 15-year-old James, and it's a wonderful sight.
Yeah.
And his elder sister's in college, and his older brother's about to go to college, and life goes on.
Life does go on. That's true. Thank you.
Thank you.
What inspired you to compile these passages into a book when you published a book earlier this year with The Story I Am in April?
Oh, that was a different kettle of fish. That was a collection of pieces that I had done about writing. I was unaware when I wrote The Story I Am how many pieces I had done about writing, how much of my writing was about writing. I think it's part of the fact I just enjoy it. A lot of my fellow writers, better than I am, a lot of my fellow writers do not like writing. They like the idea of having written, but they do not like the process. I love the process. I love sitting down at the piano and playing the music. I love writing. And so I wrote a ton of stuff on it, and I thought it might be useful for people. And people, I guess, have found it that. So the Story I Am is a very big collection of all the pieces I've done on writing for 40 years.
How do you enjoy teaching in that to that degree?
I do. I am better at it now than I used to be. I started teaching at the age of 22 when I was
Oh,
at
wow.
Harvard. And I knew nothing, absolutely nothing. I was totally faking my way through. But in the last, say, 20 years, I've become a very, very good teacher. And the reason I have, and this goes back to the lesson that you had mentioned before of the abjuring of self. The reason I'm a better teacher now is I do not enter that classroom thinking, oh, Christ, I have to go through this and it's taking time away from my writing. I never do that. I have plenty of time for writing. And when I give myself to a classroom, I give myself to a classroom. I am entirely theirs. And for the 3 hours that we meet. And then I listen very well. I've learned to listen very well to the writing students. And that combination has made me a better teacher. Yes, I like it a lot. I could retire. I mean, it would be hard, a little hard financially, but it's not impossible. But I wouldn't retire. It is just too interesting to me.
Have you found any of your students have that spark of brilliance that you think will
Oh
probably
gosh,
take them?
yes. Oh yeah,
uh,
yeah. And the water rises and rises. Stony Brook has an incredible writing program now. When I started there, it wasn't very much, but little by little, it started to develop a reputation. And now with Billy Collins teaching there, and Meg Wolitzer teaching there, and Paul Harding, who won the Pulitzer for Tinkers, teaching there, and Amy Hempel teaching there, and the rest of us, we love this, and we have a very, very good staff. I am not at all modest about my colleagues. They are exceptional, and the program is exceptional too. I mean, lots of my students have published already, published novels, published memoirs, certainly published in quarterlies and journals. It's very gratifying and fun.
What are you reading right now?
I'm not reading anything at the moment. But I'm going to be. No, don't get upset. I'm Paul, because my friend.
You had to expect
Paul,
that question.
yeah, I know. Get up and just stop it. Paul Muldoon, who's a dear friend of mine and a great, great poet, sent me his volume that is coming out in November. So I'm going to start reading that as soon as I get rid of this unseemly self-promotion and go back to my normal life.
Unseemly self-promotion. I'm sorry. Oh, good heavens. Are there any other questions? Some of your favorite writers is what Nancy just asked.
It's impossible, really, because I like them for different reasons. I like Wallace Stevens for the mystery and the pain of his writing, Elizabeth Bishop for the observation of his writing. I used to write a lot. I studied poetry under Robert Lowell, and I used to like Lowell more than I do now, but that's just a matter of shifting tastes. I loved Conrad for a long time, hated his politics, but loved his style. Something about going from Polish to English made him write words well. I love Nabokov. Nabokov is reprehensible. I love Nabokov. Right. One has to ask with Lolita, well, if you hate it so much, why are you reading it? Because he could write and write, and he persuaded you. Not that pedophilia was something that you wanted to applaud, but he showed you the limits or the extents, or the extent of the mind and the morals as they collide with art. So all of those are our favorites. But as we mentioned, Paul Harding before, was my colleague at Stony Brook. I just read his new novels, A Knockout. I'm a great, great Paul Harding fan. Amy Hempel's wonderful writer. She invented a very, very short kind of story and does that beautifully. No, I willingly, happily give myself to other writers, and I don't feel in competition with them. I think partly because I don't do what they do and they don't do what I do. Yeah. If I find anybody who does what I do, I will have him put away. Just find some way of getting rid of him as soon as I can.
You published with Turtle Point Press. Are you pleased with them as a publisher?
Yeah.
One of the things that I noticed with this book is it's very unusual to have a $15.95, and it's a hardcover. It's a little hardcover By the way, just shamelessly commercial of me, they're lovely signed custom book plates that
Oh,
we
cool.
have. So
I'm very
thank
glad.
you for sending them on. They're all signed. For those of you who already got your book from me, just shoot me an email and I'll send you out a plate to put in your book. Because we've been very, um, we got these books in and we've turned out about 35 of them. So, I mean, a lot of you may not have these plates already. Uh, just to sort of wrap up the bookstore side of things, we have the books. Give us a call. It's not a big deal. Um, I'm finding that there's an awful lot of inspirational writing coming out now because people are writing about the pandemic and their process and what they're working through. But very few of them have really touched on, to my way of thinking, um, something that could both inspire you and get you to think and change direction possibly at the same time. So there's been a wonderful Kirkus review of this book that you might want to pick up on. It's certainly written better than my review. The News Times, for those of you who are local here, the Hearst local Connecticut Hearst newspaper picked up on it and wrote a half-page
Yeah,
article.
Linda Kuntz was the reporter, and she was great.
Linda was wonderful and she really did a great job. And you may have seen it in the local Danbury paper, but it's also in the Connecticut, all the Connecticut press. So we'll have to talk Westport at some point, Roger, because my mother had a bookstore there called Pymander Bookshop.
Oh, I remember that name.
That's my mom's.
That's
Yeah.
wonderful. What a
Yes.
nice connection.
Yeah, it's just, and if anyone taught you or shaped you as a writer, oh, thank you. Here's a question. Uh, who, if anyone, taught you or shaped you as a writer?
I don't know is the answer, because there've been so many sort of fragment writers are thieves in some way. We take a little here and we take a little there, and both from things that we read and things of people who matter to us. A teacher, I went to the Friends School in New York, not much of a school, but there was a great teacher of English there named John Beck Shank. And John Beck Shank was notable in a number of ways, but one of which was he was a homosexual. That's what it was called, a homosexual. Gay had not even entered the lexicon as a term. And he was held in contempt, I think, by the school because he was homosexual. He was the best teacher possible. Everybody just loved him. He was so inventive. He taught us Hamlet by having us build the Globe Theater, a model of the Globe Theater, and
Wow.
play it. Also, and he used to take words out of poetry and ask us to put in the right words. He was the most inventive teacher, and he certainly taught me how to teach. He was a poet, and he published a book of poems in the Army, and I remember just wanting to be a poet. I wasn't going to be his kind of poet, and I wasn't going to be his kind of writer, but he was definitely the first person I remember who said, the world of letters, the world of literature is important, is very important. And he was brave. He was brave being gay in a world that was threatening to gays at the time. I think he was fired because he was gay eventually. They offered some other excuse, but that's basically why it was. But he was a great man, and those of us lucky enough to study with him would never forget him. John Beck Shank was his name.
Nancy, you have another question?
Oh,
I did unmute you, dear. You can unmute yourself again.
sorry.
Sorry.
A lot of what you talk about, Roger, in your books, it seems to me to be a little bit of memoir. Do you consider yourself a memoirist?
I'm called it, and so I guess I must be. I don't.
Oh, is that what they call you?
They said memoirist. I said, okay, fine. The only book that really is a memoir is The Boy Detective, which I write about my walking around New York, and that pretty much is all memoir. Making Toast has memories in it. Kayak Morning, which is one of my favorite books about writing about grief, that has memories in it too, and this one has memories in it too, in Cold Moon. But I tend to use memory the way I would use anything else, as some new riff to go to. Again, as I say, like playing the piano, you move one thing and then you go to another thing. Best review I ever got was Pete Hamill. in the New York Times Book Review, and he compared me to a jazz musician, which was just great. But what he really said was, Roger writes to surprise himself. I said, thank you, Lord, I can go. That's all I ever wanted to hear, because this was absolutely true. I write to surprise myself, and that's what you do in music too. You know, at least when you improvise, you're playing along and suddenly say, oh, "Wow!" And when you're writing, you sometimes say, "Who said that? Where did that come from?" Those are very nice moments.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Am I the only person asking questions?
No, I quoted Anita and a couple of other people.
Good.
So they've been out there. Let's see. No, that's it. Oh, no. Those seem to be all the questions. I'm going to call for it, calling once, twice, 3 times. Okay. Roger, it's been a great evening.
Thank you. It's been great for me too, and I'm very grateful to you and all the folks who listened in. If they buy the book, I hope they enjoy it.
Well, I have